get them through. We're going live, by the way, so I'm just going to keep talking through this part a little bit. But yeah, out of all of them, like Amy Coney Barrett's the psychopath that they want to like annihilate abortion and annihilate wage rights. They're afraid that Gorsuch, who, if memory serves, Gorsuch was like, yeah, you should freeze to death if your job tells you to die. If I remember
Oh,
right,
yeah.
yeah, that was Gorsuch. Like that sociopath is one of the hopes that Roe v. Wade won't be overturned. Liberals are grasping at straws because they don't know how to govern.
Yeah,
They are just dying. Like they're not doing too good. Yeah, that's a horrifying prospect. You're relying on a guy who drinks beer with his butt and rapes women, and you're relying on a guy who thinks like if your employer's like you should go die, you have to be like thir, yeah, thir.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, we're
Well,
fucked.
they just tell you you have the choice to not die. You could choose to, go lose your job and never be able to work again, and effectively also choose death, but just a longer, slower, drawn out version of death.
Yeah, you gotta starve because you're jobless.
Yeah.
All right,
I don't understand where the difficulty of that choice is.
my bad. my bad, sir.
As a side note, the HR department sent out your letters all today.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, it's about time.
All of your salaries are being increased.
Ugh.
Oh.
You won't have to pay money anymore.
Yeah.
You're fired.
Yeah.
This was a corporate takeover by Jeff Bezos.
Ah, shit. Ah.
Yeah.
Damn Bezos.
Astoundingly cheap. We were bought for astoundingly cheap.
Well, I am a cheap date.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, apparently it was all gift cards.
Yep.
It was.
I got these.
They gave me a gold watch.
Did they give you a gold star?
Then they gave me
a
shower.
gold-plated watch.
Oh, no.
I didn't ask for the watch. All right, we're live. I don't know where the viewers are. I don't care.
Get a good old fashioned ass kicking.
Oh, there they are.
His hat in his watch.
Happy Friday. This is the Sons of Trier live stream / podcast. I'm Dan Cohen. I'm joined by John Sinclair.
Yes, sir.
I'm joined by Gangstacleese, aka EattheRich, aka No Limitz, aka aka Thunderballs, aka the Puerto Rican rattlesnake,
God Emperor of Doom,
aka the God Emperor of Doom. Did I miss any?
Doom or Dune?
Both.
Okay.
Yes.
The God Emperor of Doom and the God Emperor of Doom. Did I miss any?
No, I think
Probably.
we covered all of them.
Okay, good. Now I'm also joined by Cenk Engels.
Oh, hey, that's me, self-hating capitalist. I'm back for another round.
Indeed. I don't know why. Tonight is not going to be friendly to you.
Oh, thank God. I was worried.
Yeah. We're going to punch you right in the capitalism.
Right in the capital.
I bothered to write notes, which means two things. One, prepare. Two, this is going to go for way too long. So strap the hell in, get your diapers on. You know, that feeding tube, you'll want the feeding tube. You'll want the IV fluid. And hello, happy Friday, everybody.
No, the feeding tube's just
water.
out of reach.
I drink water.
Put some water in that feeding tube.
Yeah. And air bubbles.
Yeah, air bubbles help too.
That'll do it. All right. So I wanted to talk about our dear friends Tina and the Ubermensch. I want to talk some neoliberalism. Because this is something we're always wrestling around. If you were to see our group chat, if you think my Twitter feed is just loaded with theory bullshit, the group chat goes from literally who's name this porn star to fucking 5 days of me fighting with John about what is a neoliberal.
I was gonna say I feel like we never quite completely answer that question, but that we uncover stuff along the way. It's about It's about the discoveries along the way, folks. It's not about actually reaching the destination.
It's about the journey. That's what knowledge
There's a
is.
lot there.
It's a
Listen, I'm
journey.
gonna quote a New York judge on this one. I
Okay.
know it when I see it.
Yeah, that's true. You can spot a neoliberal by their behaviors. So let's get in. This is what I have so far to figure out the composite. What is and what drives the neoliberals? Fascist light. Well, kind of. Offshoot. I always like to think of it as an offshoot of fascism. Something in the same tier category of awful, but there's a notable difference. Neoliberals aren't collectivists. They are vehemently opposed to collectivism. And I want to start with that. These people are monads. A monad is just a big fancy word for individual, single unit, the object. So let's get to the easy part, right? These people love, they love two things. They love secular humanism, okay? If we were to diagnose what a neoliberal is, or how they think, what their thought processes are, let's start with the religion. They love secular humanism because of the idea, and that is born into that, which is that really we as a species are above others, and this idea. Yeah, it's easy to forget. The fascists are, even our fascists now are collectivists. They're just really stupid. And they're just really bad at it.
Yeah, they're just really bad
Um,
at it.
Their brain has
They're
similarly
bad at
been
a lot of
poisoned
things.
by social media into thinking it's posting is praxis.
yes. Well, you know what though? They pulled off 1-6. They got together on 1-6. We've not gotten into the Capitol building and shat on Nancy Pelosi's desk. You
You
know,
got
It
us
depends
there.
on it.
You got our asses.
yeah. They're not about
Well,
that.
a lot
What?
of that is like, how does this overlap with like BLM, and like does that count as like leftist stuff, or is that like an identity based thing? But then like leftists show up to those as well, so I don't know. That being said, we didn't do anything like 1-6, so that is true.
Yeah. You know,
We had no singular day that was like that.
no. You know, again, we're not see the thing people forget is if we evolve out of liberalism's individualism, right? Remember how we talked and I had said the grandfather of all this bullshit is monarchism, so we have to be careful not to fall into monarchist type thinking because it still runs in liberalism, and there's no rhyme or reason that it cannot run. Those kind of thoughts cannot run through an anarchist, a communist, a fascist, a neoliberal. You need me to open that? Okay. The same thing with liberalism. The reason we're on guard about being liberals or whatever, right, against liberal thought is because liberalism predates us. The communism, anarchism, and fascism all come out of that. Neoliberalism obviously loves it so much that it takes the name and adds the word new. Fascists have Mussolini and Trump. Neoliberals have Pod Save America and Vaush. Vaush isn't a neoliberal. He's just not a very good leftist. Like, you just don't. That's the hot take for tonight. He's just bad. A lot of those people are leftists. They're just bad at it. And to be fair, that's because they're probably, like, if you look at their separation from regular old liberalism, they're still in the orbit. It's not, you know, again, if I were to diagram it out, you got monarchism up here. That's like, how did I put it before? That would be like the primordials in Greek mythology. Then you have the Titans. That's liberalism. Yeah, Vaush sucks. I said it, you know. And then from there you have the Olympian gods. You have your communists, anarchists, and fascists. What is different is, of course, the monarchist is a hyper individualist society where one person is important. In liberalism, every individual is supposed to be important. And in those three ideologies, we have the collective is important. Now, we don't like the fascist formation of collective, and goddamn if they like ours, but it is undeniable that they are a collectivist movement as well. They believe in a strong nation state. They believe in a unified nation state. They believe that all should be sacrificed to the state. Now, we don't quite believe that, obviously, but you can't argue that kind of rhetoric is individualist. It's literally the opposite. Now, what do they steal from monarchism? They steal the idea of the monarch. You know, they call it the leader. We would call it externally the authoritarian dictator. But you know, that's what they steal. So, getting back to the text at hand, right? Um, when it comes to religion, the two things, are, at least our neoliberals and the neoliberals of the West, really, really push, okay, is an attachment to religion. So they don't mind secular humanism as a legal principle. They certainly have a problem with somebody saying they're atheist at the high up, right? They have to have this false humility to a God. And neoliberalism does work best, at least so far. Now, it could mutate on me and then I sound like an asshole, but as far as what we're dealing with, it works best in monotheism. There is a reason a lot of these neoliberals all profess specifically Christianity as their religion. That's not at all by accident. You have Modi as an outlier, being a Hindu neoliberal and a fascist. He's finding ways to merge those two ideologies into, like, possibly the true form. I don't know. But that's
would
an
you say
outlier.
this is
Not
an
even his
aside, but
final
would
form.
you say, like, in terms of just like the ideological development, has he developed neoliberalism the most in in the last like decade or so? Because I think in terms of like ideological work that's getting put in, he's really married a lot of things together that I don't know. I don't know how he gets to thread the needle and like why he specifically is the one that gets to do that. But the fact that he has, I mean, this has just been my personal observation, he has managed to like do the equivalent of like taking all the tropes that we think of Jews with and taking all the tropes that we think of black people with and like merged them on Pakistani and Muslim people that are in his country.
Yeah.
Which
That's impressive.
Trump couldn't do that. Yeah, on some level, I can't. I don't know how he. I don't know why he gets to break all those rules. Because Trump couldn't fucking do that.
If you look at what we would have in a linear chronological fashion, like if you go back far enough, the stereotypes about us were that we had giant dicks, we were brutal savages and thugs, and then it became we control the banks. He just did it all at once.
That's
he was
true.
like, fuck it. And he has a lot of years of that kind of praxis to go off of. So yeah, why not? Just do it. Throw it all at them. Because if you can't, you know what it is too. If you can't rope them in on their savages and beneath you crap, then you could definitely get them on their elites who control you.
Yeah, but at this, he's managed. He somehow gets them to do both.
Yeah, because he just says both.
He just I guess he does. That's what he does. He just says both.
Yeah. He just goes for it. Again, I always say, man, find what's admirable in your enemy. Our enemy certainly has bravado in the case of the Indian context. That's an admirable quality. It's the aggressive. Counterpoint is he's a complete piece of shit.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's how that is.
Those are both true. The bravado itself is an admirable quality. The fact that he's out there working it, man. He's going for it, and he runs one of the world's biggest countries. In terms of population size and raw human labor potential, only China is a rival, a valid rival. Even our colonial projects don't add up to 1 billion. So yeah, ballsy. Good for you, Modi. Counterpoint, you're a piece of shit. And if something happens to you, I'm gonna be laughing. You kind of bought it at that point. Problem is these things, they never, I say things here not to mean Indian people. Everybody settle down. I mean neoliberals. They're things, not people. But these things never seem to die. God damn. What, Reagan's
automatons?
Yeah, Reagan's on term 11?
Yeah, they're like Skynet.
Yeah, just the fucking things never die. And then we're gonna have Buttigieg. Ugh. God.
Just like in his forms. It's a shapeshifter. It's T-1000.
Dude, we have improved it. We have made it smaller. It runs off of cheese.
like the entire movie is about running away from liberalism.
Yeah, but yeah. So as far as religion goes, like I said, Modi really is an outlier. But these people love the false humility before God, and I can't personally decide if I would ping it as it's almost like going to the grave of your enemy and mocking him, right? Because let's
Oh,
not
dream.
forget, it wasn't the communists who killed God. It wasn't the fascists who killed God. It was the fucking libertarians who cut the fucking king's head off and cut God's head off. They killed him. He's dead. That's Nietzsche's right. He's dead, and they killed him. So I can't tell if their false humility is either just like just another type of pandering to the pores, or if it's a flex on authority, or if it's just mocking your dead enemy, or if they manage to find an act that combines all three, like three of their favorite things together. I can't tell what the driver is there. Because there's really to sit externally, right? If you're fascist as shit, you could easily be an atheist. If you believe the nation state overall is you want other religions to be out of your way, so your nation state can take that religious fulfillment. You can take that nationalism to a religious fervor, right? You can really make these
Ooh,
people
yeah.
nationalist. Yeah, see what I'm saying? Like there's a real appeal there, right? They didn't do it. They always appeal to God. They appeal to weird gods like fucking Wodan and the fucking horse fucker or whatever. That's who they appeal to for some god awful reason. Like we're missing our traditional roots, and that includes, I don't know, eating next to where we shit, I guess,
And horse fucking.
and horse
This is
fucking.
for you.
Yeah, you do you, man. But that's the first sign. You're always looking for somebody who's way too rich and way too proud to be a Christian, and a lot of false humility before God, because none of them at all live like their professed religion, but they sure as shit make sure to tell you on the campaign trail how religious they are. And there's even that you see it when they do their political performances, that false reading of the Bible. They've picked out a passage beforehand and then they read it and it's supposed to placate the yokels, right? They
Yep.
eat that shit up.
Oh, they love it.
So that's the first. If you're diagnosing these people, look for false humility, the false religious incentive. And again, in a little bit, I think I know why that is, but I don't want to go too far right now. Because that's not the most interesting one either, of course. Right? Let's get into the big ones. Number one, the dirtiest word in the English language right now, at least to this guy, austerity. If we're talking economics, oh,
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I don't think I know anyone who's like austerity, yay.
if you do, you hate them.
Of course.
Now, we're gonna define austerity here as the drive to cut away public spending and the drive from debts to the public. That is taxation. It is about the shrinking of government on economic terms. If you only have $50, you can only buy so much food. If you have $500, you can buy a lot more food. If we want to keep you under our boot, you're getting $50. And you're going to have to struggle to get that 50. Okay? Make sense? Easy enough?
Yeah.
Well, you can have the 50. We're charging you for your uniform.
Yeah, we're going to charge you 25 for the uniform. Now,
I laugh, but that's happened to me.
was it at the restaurant?
Yeah,
Oh,
Did they just walk in and start rifling through your pockets?
more or less.
yeah, it's not far off.
You got deboed.
You work for your first week and your first paycheck is like $6 and you worked all week and you're like, how the hell did that happen?
Exactly when you need it too.
Yeah. Well, because you haven't been paid in a fucking month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
You're like, why is my paycheck $6? I've been working all week. Well, the pay period started at the end of the week.
I'm just showing you who's
And-
boss.
And we're taking your first paycheck. We're removing the cost of your uniform in it. You gave me a t-shirt and charged me $25. Yep, that's the cost of the uniform.
all right.
The only people that like bosses are bosses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fucking true. All right.
And they don't even like each other.
Now, I should have said this
Not
up front.
generally.
I should have said this up front, but you can obviously tell, like, when I prepare these things, I worry about the theory work far more than I worry about the presentation. It's always my downfall. I don't script well. Never been good at scripting. So what we're doing is we're going to strip this back from what you can see into what's going on. We're going through the process of deconstruction. That's from Derrida. And if you read about Derrida's work or about Derrida's life, you will find that he too was a shitty fascist. But he gives us one amazing tool for analysis, and that's deconstruction. Swear by that method. You can get to what these people are actually about if you start by stripping those layers back as to what they are doing and how they got there. So I make no bones about it. We're going to be using that methodology here. Okay. I know. I gotta tell you, I love the dry episodes. The feisty ones are fun. Sometimes I'm in the mood to just tell dick jokes, but this is satisfying.
Yep, let's
right
go.
to the soul. I'm going. All right.
Look at him go.
So if we thank you. So if we look at if we're actually looking at austerity as its practice, what does that actually come with, right? Obviously, social services cuts. Obviously, cuts the infrastructure spending, right? The idea that the government should be involved in critical infrastructure and infrastructure maintenance goes out the window. It does not come with a reduction to militarized forces. It comes with some of that money that was cut being shifted into more and more militarization, both of domestic military forces, FBI, fucking state police departments, local police departments, and it comes to externalized military forces. Everything from your Coast Guard into your fucking invasion in Iraq. Okay? That, we're going to get to why. But it's critical to note that even though they talk about cut spending here, they have no problem with the government's entry into the economy being through arms manufacture, which they could pick any fucking industry, but it is of crucial note they pick arms manufacture and distribution. It comes with a lower taxation burden, and I want to put an asterisk on that because they will lower proportionally based on income functionally. And we know that's true. They lower the more income you have, the less they want you to pay in taxes. Their argument being everybody should have an equivalent tax burden. But an equivalent tax burden would at best be, at the most generous interpretation, would obviously be weighted. Because the magnitude of somebody with $1,000 in their pocket is different than the magnitude of somebody with $1 million. But they want that number to be unilateral and universal. Your tax burdens are the same. And I'm talking about the end dollar. Like when you run through and calculate your taxes, they want that number at the end to be the same as the wealthiest person. So if you pay $2,000, they only want them paying $2,000, right? That's not unintentional either. That is, ideologically speaking, is actually tied into the military stuff, which again we're going to get to. Okay, but I want you to hold those ideas in your head. I'm going to ask you to hold a lot of things in your head, so for that I apologize. This urge towards austerity is derived from the hatred of the state, going all the way back to liberalism, frankly, and coming through the three anarchism, communism, and fascism, coming through that as next generation, if you will, ideologies, right? Because fascism hates the state as it is, communism hates the bourgeoisie state, anarchists hate the state. So this disgust with the state is not at all unique to neoliberals, but they are brutally effective in implementing it because of how they go about it. Instead of something like fascism, which requires a violent conversion, communism, a violent conversion, anarchism, a violent conversion, neoliberalism acts as a tumor on the state, sapping away at its life. The final point on austerity is that you see an urge towards deregulation of the market, smart regulation of the market, which is deregulation with a cuter term, meaning we'll leave a very bare bones regulation in place and we'll call that smarter, and a disgust with antitrust and anti-monopoly legislation, which I would think is Cenk's first point of contention here, right? Because what's a good capitalist hate? They hate monopoly and they hate trusts, cartels, etc. No blowback from you? Is Discord even running?
Lucky you.
Oh, it is. I got no blowback. He's probably on his phone.
No,
John?
well, I mean, the only extra point I have, I guess, is just to ask. You talked about how part of it, how it manifests is state spending on the military, and I was curious.
Yeah.
Is state spending? This might seem pedantic, but is state spending on corn and farm subsidies a vestige of that is unique to like just American history, or is that part of it as well?
In our system, that is a vestige, but that vestige serves a critical point because you do need to feed those soldiers. And it is currently unpalatable to demand that they pay for those meals at the mess halls. I say currently. I would expect within the next 50 years that becomes something they propose to save the military money so they can direct more at the actual arms manufacture and arms acquisition if they can't start replacing them with robotics.
Yeah, it seems like we're just going to move into drones and the military being sort of just like the training place where you go and like get trained on how to be a private contractor, basically. If you want to do like special forces stuff or the equivalent.
Well, I would think with the special forces, they're still going to keep the, I missed the Glass-Steagall Act. Yeah, well, that had to go. That has to die. In the face of everything that happened, logically it had to die because the ideological act is, well, see, you had all this regulation in the way and look what happened, which is completely opposite. Yeah, as far as that goes, what I would expect is that special forces are maintained for wet work purposes. They love their wet work. Look at CIA Pete there. Well, how many Afghani women did he strangle with his bare hands? You will never know, but God love him. It was enough that they love that little turd, even though he's the most like insufferable human being to be around, right? And in his credit, he feels the same about most of humanity. You know, he's just a glass-eyed dog killer, a freak.
Small talk with a glass-eyed dog strangler.
Yeah, very awkward. You're talking to somebody who, number one, let's face that he's asexual, right? Because any gratification mechanism he has in his brain has been sublimated into violent urges, hence his disdain for regular people and his, again, whatever he was doing for the Office of Naval Intelligence, whatever he's doing for ONI, he murdered people. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually had his hands in the torture rooms. You know what I'm saying? Would not.
Yeah.
Perfect kind of personality for that. Like, the guy is just bad news. The rest of them, you know, if you look at like the 2020 Democratic candidates, for example, only one of them was a serial killer. Wait,
I guess that's fair.
Good luck. Class I. Yeah. So, yeah, as it comes to like corn and shit like that, you're gonna see that you can use those subsidies to keep the farmers producing. Yeah. Oh, if you can strangle an Afghani woman to death, it's not much of a stretch to assume you've killed a dog or 7, or that your neighborhood you live in strangely doesn't have dogs anymore that go out. Yeah, Lee Atwater, right? The next point I wanted to get to, I got the taxes, domestic. Good. Now, they do present themselves perpetually as a merited individual, right? So if their economic policy is austerity, their social policy, we're going to get into the meat now, because that is the meritocracy, and with all the bullshit that comes with it, right?
Oh boy.
Yeah. So this refers to the idea of earned credibility through market competition-based success. The ultimate idea of the meritocracy is that you are worthy if you are competitively worthy, i.e. you're operating in a totally free market and you have risen to the position that you have risen to. That generates your authority and social credit.
Yeah, about that free market.
Go on. I'd like to hear how you could poke any holes in that idea.
No, there's no holes. I'm just saying that puts Jeff Bezos on top, and that's definitely not. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Disgusting human being.
Notice that there are not notice now that from fucking physicists who have worked around the government are all saying the future of space exploration is through private industry. The idea that the government cannot at all participate in the space race when it was two governments who initiated the space race and the collectivist government won on everything but putting a guy on the moon, and the only other people to put somebody on the moon was a libertarian government. The idea that the private market is the only way to get into space now is mortifying and ahistorical, right? Elon Musk is not a meritocracy contender. He stole everything that made him worth anything. That actually, funny enough, doesn't count. That's not how meritocracy is actually applied. It's simply a measurement of wealth. Yeah, I agree. You're right. In a real meritocracy, right? In a genuine meritocracy, not an ideological meritocracy. No, you don't get to steal everything and then be bad at your job and then be as powerful as you are. That's literally the antithesis of a meritocracy. But neoliberal meritocracy is simply about counting your bank account. That's it. That's it. It literally, your bank account is a scoreboard.
Oh, I knew it. I was always calling it a high score, and everybody's like, "That's how you see it." I'm like, "Well, that's kind of what it is, isn't it?"
You said that because you're right. That's why you said that. That is the rating of social worth. That's also why we track billionaires so heavily and look to see how much who's the new richest person, because the thing not said is that they now have the most social right and the social social credibility to set policy for the rest of us. Neoliberal meritocracy, grifter's gonna grift. Yeah, hustle, learn to hustle. But these individuals are then seen as the most merited to speak out on social issues.
They can't even govern.
Well, these are not people who have been trained to government, and these are not people who are governing in a cooperative sense, deciding what can be done. No, these are authoritarians who have their money from a very specific industry, of which it is dubious that they are actually experts on, and they are not just experts on finance capital.
Yeah.
But they are considered to be like the top end of society. They are it. They won society, right? And they have the ability to then influence society however they want. If you look at somebody like Bill Gates, is Cenk sleeping? No way.
He could be.
Oh, that would fucking rock if he is. We're gonna mess with him. I wish I was there so I could.
Or he's farting real loud.
That would be awesome too. He's just busting a Stavros Halkios right on the stream, just farting like a pig. Be amazing. Something so avant-garde about that. I love it.
He's like, no, I'm up.
I can't look away. I have to draw you. Stink clouds around him.
I can see that.
Oh yeah. If you look at Bill Gates is I think the epitome example, right? Everything should go to charity. I've set up charities to enact social policy, right? I decide what is important with national healthcare systems. I'm cutting off black men's foreskins for my own fucking amusement. And we just let him do it. Nobody puts a check on him. Nobody makes him account for why the fuck he's doing that. Nobody makes him pay his, I'm going to use the word victims. Nobody makes him do that. And with his education policy, which was a fucking disaster, the worst he had to say was, oopsie doodles, I fucked up. He ruined how many children's lives with his shit education policy. And bred a whole industry of fiends and just awful human beings around those same policies. And what's his consequence? Oops. Yeah, it's a very weird fetish. Go look that one up. Google that. I'm not. This isn't a joke. I told you, dry ass theory cast. This is my bread and butter. Dry as shit. Lecturing. Love it.
Yes, when you Google Bill Gates foreskin, you'd be surprised that the results are legitimate news articles.
Yeah.
to the most part, because it's one of those things where like a lot of the stuff that like gets talked about like is also gets like has like right wing like morons rant about it and like talk about how Bill Gates is I don't know, like secretly a Jew or something like that. And that's
Yeah.
basically like the implications of like what a lot of them say
Uh,
is like, now the truth is a little bit more boring than that, but also like he's still terrible.
Yeah,
You know.
the foreskins thing isn't boring. It's genuinely creepy in like a Jeffrey Epstein way. Also, by the way, Bill Gates, friend of Jeffrey Epstein, right? And we're gonna get into why everybody's
Yeah.
friends with Jeffrey. Oh,
oh boy,
I
cancel.
if you if you're able to get through the dry part, we'll get to the fun half.
Oh, I'll wait for that.
I swear to
That's
God,
a
he's
great
sleeping.
deal.
Yeah. So the idea of meritocracy is supposed to satisfy egalitarianism. Everybody has an equal opportunity and shot to be that top dog, but the market is going to decide it. It's not going to be decided on among individuals, something haphazard, something random, right? It's going to be decided by sanguine market competition, the crucible that is economics. These people, and I use that term very loosely, okay, but they have human bodies with organs, so I have to respect that from an ethical standpoint. This is going to get in. This is going to get into one of my. You have to. Just because they use their labor in ways we would say is mortifying or should be criminal, does not mean they don't have
But,
bodies with organs.
but what if they drink adrenochrome?
Well, again, it's not something we'd approve of. Harvesting children for
Oh,
their adrenal
oh.
glands. We are against that. That is not socialism. That's not even Bakunin's socialism. That's not even that. The lowest form of anarcho-socialism.
Goodness. Okay,
I,
okay, guy.
I always forget that Gates is a friend with Epstein. Just got horrifying. Mortifying, it should be criminal. Exactly. Yeah. Well, hopefully they will be friends again if you get my drift there, chat.
Uh-oh.
Legally, these are jokes. Cenk's asleep. He was playing Pokemon. I know how long he worked today. It's fine. We're gonna get into my favorite bitch. Every one of you always hears me bitch about this. Standpoint epistemology or expert
Oh, boy.
epistemology.
Yeah.
I know. Here's what epistemology is. Epistemology, by itself, the word is innocuous. We all have one. The epistemology is just how you fucking understand things. That's it. Standpoint or expertise epistemology is based in the idea that the individual's subjective assertions are truth, and that there is no real objective truth to reach beyond that. And there are times when it's very appropriate to apply standpoint epistemology. It's absolutely deployable and should be taken as fact or as at least credible evidence. I'll give you a great example. If you've heard the slogan, believe all women, when you deconstruct that to what they're actually saying is that in most of these scenarios where women are sexually harassed, and we can extend this to all victims of sexual harassment, but I will use that phrase as is. In cases where women are sexually harassed, often the aggressor isolates them and engages in the harassment. So part of the evidence of the harassment is the allegation itself and the details of the allegation. That first-hand witness, that standpoint, should be believed. That is entirely accurate, right? How else are you going to get to whether or not this happened if it happens between two people behind closed doors and nobody's fucking talking about it at the time? Nobody else was there to witness it at the time. So you need standpoint epistemology is critical to have in your fucking wheelhouse. What isn't so useful is somebody like, I don't know, who's a good one the group can relate to? Haim Saban saying that there are no that it's anti-Semitic to be against Israel, right? Somebody like Haim Saban saying that. There are, to my knowledge, at least 3 Jews right now between chat and on this podcast. We would argue something vastly different about Israel, wouldn't we? We have got the death to prove it.
I wanted to state out like what somebody who believes in standpoint epistemology would say that it is, because the way that you described it is it sounds a lot like postmodern theory, and it's a little bit different than postmodern theory.
Good.
So basically, I'll try to keep this brief.
No,
the assertion is essentially, okay, so if you have society is socially separated into minorities and at least pluralities, but many times majorities. If society is separated into those two things, if you are in the majority of a group, you have an inside looking out perspective, which means that you cannot completely and fully assess the group structure. You need somebody who is a minority, who is on the outside looking in, to have a complete and total perspective on whatever social construction you have. And that means, by definition, because they're a minority, there are fewer of them, and because of that, you have to in some way privilege their viewpoint, their standpoint, because if you don't have a complete perspective on how everything is functioning, and there are fewer of them, which means you actually have to go out of your way to get their standpoint on the subject. The problem with that's
just
go ahead.
Just a small point of contention. That's more the application of why you do it rather than the definition, because the definition is pretty sanguine. It's the subjective experience over objective truth, and postmodernity plays into it a lot because that's one of the skip.
Well, they would make the contention that you can't even begin to approach objective truth without that standpoint of a minority, because again, if you don't privilege their viewpoint, then you can't actually begin to have like a 3D look at whatever the social construct is. That has it. First of all, there are 2 things about this theory. Well, there are 3 things. The first thing is that you're absolutely correct. You need this on your tool belt somewhere. This is like incredibly basic feminism. Like, this came about with the rise of like second wave feminism, and we've talked about second wave feminism before. There are all sorts of issues with it, but there are that is when it became more of an academic subject than just the we should be able to vote subject, right? So there are pieces of it that are important.
Well,
but more to the point.
Just to be fair, you need this. If you are working customer service and your customer comes in and complains that their product didn't work, you need standpoint epistemology. You need to be able to use that in your tool belt to believe that the customer's thing didn't work or the customer's order was wrong. It's very basic. Yeah.
It is very basic. Yeah. The problem with it is that it also, if it is your only if it's your only lens, and this is why you need multiple lenses for just approaching life and interacting with politics. If it is your only lens, then the material world effectively doesn't exist, and we're all brains in jars, and raw count on brains in jars between minorities and majorities across all social realms is the only thing that matters. So different social constructions matter, but there's no objective world effectively in this viewpoint. If it's your only viewpoint, which is untrue.
Well,
there's a material world.
Yeah, there absolutely is. Let me tell you what that leads to, right? If you are constantly competitively trying to assert your version of the narrative over everybody else's, and everybody else is doing the same thing, you actually know what this is called. Conservatives misuse this term, and it is entirely a pejorative term. It is the victimhood Olympics, or the ranking of suffering, which is the politer term. It is a game then of ranking suffering as to who gets to speak on a subject, which is disgusting.
Well, here's the other thing about this that I wanted to get into.
Well, what was your third point?
Well, here, let me get to the third point first.
Yeah.
The third point is that because this has no like these views tend to be ahistoric. These views, in terms of if it's your only lens, then if society is constructed around standpoint theory, which is really, this is one of the most undergirding facets of modern life, I think.
Yeah, no, well, because we live in the neoliberal hellscape. Yeah.
If your society is undergirded by that completely, then this viewpoint, this epistemology, has no ability to articulate historic problems, disparities between groups, minorities that perhaps deserve to be minorities, such as Nazis.
Right.
Like it has no ability to make that distinction at all. And here's the thing about that. One of the things in your lizard brain that you may realize is, well, you know, I'm in the majority in a lot of cases. I might be a cis white hetero male, right? But what's one way to make myself a minority? Well, I know I can just say the N-word a bunch, and then all of a sudden I'm in the minority of white people who say the N-word.
Right.
Right.
Well,
so like,
yeah, I don't know if that's the minority right now, but yes.
Well, it depends on where you are. But yeah, that is a great way to minoritize yourself and then reassert your standpoint, because hey, all of a sudden I'm on the outside and my viewpoint matters. And here's the thing about that. Somebody who makes that assertion, it's fucking ridiculous. They're privileged in all sorts of material ways that fucking matter. But that's the thing about it. If that's your only fucking lens, then guess what? They are just as much of a minority as, in fact, they're more of a minority than a lot of groups of people. So yeah, that's essentially why we have that situation.
That's one of the
way to miss the point entirely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, that's why like I rail against it a lot, because the over application of standpoint epistemology is damaging in a very fucking real way. It very real. Breaks up friendships, breaks up relationships, makes work harder, makes life harder. It over applying that is deadly. But at the same time, again, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Where you need to apply standpoint epistemology, you have to apply it because it's clearly the right answer. You need to know if somebody says, you know, while I was working with Jeff in the back room, he called me the K slur, right? How else are we going to stop Jeff from calling Jews the K slur? We're going to have to know that it happened. We're going to need to apply that. We can't just be like, well, yeah, he said, she said, who cares, right? But this is another really damaging part of it, right? If you apply standpoint epistemology and you listen to the other, are you beholden at all, based on your own standpoint, to actually do any fucking thing about it?
Absolutely not.
Bingo. It doesn't matter. I can hear you. I can. What's they say? What do they say? What's that fucking saying they use? Shit, I can't remember. I know the negative form of it is like when they're like, you need to shut up and listen. I ain't shut up and listen all day. That's what I've been doing my entire life. The point is, I just don't give a fuck. You're wrong. You know? Especially, like, do you remember when I got canceled by Zionist Twitter?
No.
Vaguely,
I wish I did.
Yeah. When I got canceled by Zionist Twitter, basically the premise was, first, you need to listen to Jews. Well, I'm a Jewish man. Then it was, you need to listen to women and you need to listen to lesbians. As if the subject of our shared experience of anti-Semitism isn't in any way impacted by those things. That's an intentional misapplication of it. I can shut up and listen and let you spout the same anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim, and frankly, anti-Semitic rhetoric you were going to spout, but let's cut the bullshit. Okay, you can do that, but the problem is I already heard that game. You know what's that game? If I bring up Israel first, I'm the anti-Semite, but by you saying that bringing up Israel's anti-Semitic, you're calling a Jew anti-Semitic, so now you're the anti-Semite.
Yes, this is the negative flux of anti-Semitism between Jews.
Yes.
Just to cover it for viewers, if at any point a Jew calls another Jew a self-hating Jew or an anti-Semite, they have done tropes, if you will, and they have been anti-Semitic, which means the other person can say, no, well, you have internalized anti-Semitism, at which point you are making them into a trope. So it's this negative flux. you call one Jew an anti-Semite and you've achieved perpetual motion.
Yes.
So that's that's essentially the point that we cover.
Yeah.
It's so much so to just render the discussion of anti-Semitism in those conversations like completely flatten it into nothingness effectively.
Yeah.
Of course, you can't move forward from that though.
No.
Like, it's not like, okay, well, now we've both covered the fact that we're anti-Semites. Let's actually talk about this in some way. You don't get to do that.
Never.
You get to just debate that endlessly, essentially.
Chat, it is the no you defense. It is just two people playing the same reverse card forever. That's it. And they absolutely brought lesbians into it because when it failed that they couldn't just muscle that, well, you're not a Jew, so you don't have a right to talk in this conversation. Counterpoint, though, I am. So, like, what do you do about that? They have to pick apart the next point of identity, the victimhood Olympics, right? And on the land of anti-Semitism that is being conducted in the United States, when those people, like, let's be real, when they deface our graves, they don't give a shit who was in there. They give a shit that a Jew was in there. When they go to our synagogues to fire at people, they're not looking for a specific fucking other brand of identity. They're looking for Jews and they found them. So that all the other identities evaporate away to the thing that the bigot is focused on. And in their own epistemology, they are being minoritized and they are under attack. They're dead wrong, but that is still their standpoint. That is how they think about it. You need to hear their story. Zizek covered this. Right? An enemy is only an enemy if you don't hear their story. Like we didn't hear enough about Mussolini and Hitler. That was Zizek's point. And it's absolutely true. We've heard this dickhead story. It sounds like no true Scotsman fallacy, but I might be misusing it. It's very similar. It's very similar logic to no true Scotsman.
But
not quite the fallacy, but you're in the wheelhouse. Yeah.
Now, I also wanted to cover, you addressed victimhood Olympics there for a second.
Ranking suffering, yes.
Yeah, but the thing about that I find the most interesting at this point is that, and I want to talk about, where does the Ubermensch come into
We're not there
any
yet.
of your? We're not there yet. Okay, because I
yet.
want to meld these two when we get to it. So let's proceed.
Well, because I actually want to touch on Tina, and I want to touch on the Ubermensch, but that is coming. We're getting close to it. All right, because we've talked about the standpoint epistemology, or failing that, expertise epistemology. And that's critical. If you've heard the term mansplaining, what you're hearing is somebody with authority applying that term, sometimes properly, right? If you have a doctor who worked on the COVID vaccine, and they were to just list a sanguine bullet point of facts about the COVID vaccine, like this is the data we found, this is what we'd expect to see in a general population, and then an anti-vaxxer walks up and says, no, that shit puts microchips in you. In a sense, you are doing the mansplaining then, right? It's a perfectly applicable charge. Clearly, we can disregard that.
I am just curious about that point. Are you actually mansplaining if the well, I guess the idea is like, if you assert the microchip thing in earnest, you are mansplaining. But if you say it with bad faith, you're not actually mansplaining.
No, you're just
at that
trolling.
point you're just trolling, because mansplaining requires a level of earnestness on the other person's end, right?
Right.
I'm pretty sure it does, but I guess it is worst if you're doing it like in bad faith or whatever. But I was just curious about that point. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know what the problem is there though? You can't, in most cases, you can't tell if somebody's arguing good or bad faith, so you have to assume good faith.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why the charge is applicable. They would have to come, essentially the only way out of that charge is then to come along and say, either no, basically no, I was just fucking with you, which means you were acting dishonestly anyway. A lot of people who do the trolling game will hide behind devil's advocate at that point. Well, I was just, presenting it, what if, which to me is close enough that you're still trying to mansplain, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to throw a curve in the expertise, right? And again, there are points and times where the expertise is valid. You wouldn't be listening to me if you didn't think I was an expert enough to speak in these subjects. You just wouldn't, right? What value do I have? What value add am I to philosophy without you thinking that I have something worthwhile to say, right? The counterpoint to that is I don't try to just raw flex it. I either try to be supportive, or I will treat you like an adult and treat you like you're engaging in debate. You know, this can also be misapplied though. And let's take for example, you have somebody, I don't know, like Hillary Clinton, right? What was the if you think back to Hillary Clinton's campaign, it's that she has the most experience in government. You could argue against her positions that she made wrong decisions. Just because she has experience, she only has experience doing it the incorrect manner because of the outcomes, right? And there would be an opportunity there. There's a window there to dishonestly apply the idea of mansplaining, especially if it's a man going against Hillary Clinton, like I don't know, Bernie Sanders, right? And then what can you extrapolate from that? Well, Bernie Sanders is sexist because he's saying to a woman that she's not fit for the job, when in reality that particular woman, outside of the job of policing right wingers right now, probably wouldn't be fit for the job. Right? Is anybody really willing to argue that? Because it has nothing to do with her social construct of gender at this point. What it has to do with is the fact that she voted for the Iraq War. It has to do with the fact that she was in the room whenever they did Ruby Ridge and shit like that. Which again, I still argue that one particular thing might be handy now, but she bragged about Gaddafi getting the flag shoved up his ass. She bragged about the chaos she caused in North Africa. She laughed like a fiend whenever Trevor Noah asked her about her dead friend Jeffrey Epstein, right? We can argue then that her experiences would actually be shit at the job, and that this idea of her being merited based on years of service, i.e. years being in that sphere, is insufficient. There's nothing, when you credibly attack any of those decisions, if you were to say, like, well, Libya was kind of a fuck up, you got a flag shoved up a guy's ass. You got a shit ton of people murdered and their economy sucks. You turned it into a failed state. That's kind of fucked up for statecraft, right? That would show that you're bad at the job. She can argue then, dishonestly, but with the strictest use of the term, that somebody's mansplaining to her that they know how to do the job better. When in reality, yeah, they probably do, because they probably wouldn't have got a flag shoved up Gaddafi's ass. You don't even have to like Gaddafi. You know what I mean? It's not about liking the other person. It's, I've never been to a party. I've never made a decision to work that ended with a flag getting shoved up somebody's ass till they were dead. It just hasn't happened. So I like to think my decision making is good enough. Fight me on it, okay? Have you ever done that?
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
You have never gotten the flag shoved up someone's ass.
Yeah, I've never done that. So like,
that's a low bar.
Yeah, this idea of expertise fetishism, though, if we apply it the way it ought to be, of course Hillary Clinton's the most merited. She certainly has more time in government than Donald Trump, and she beats out Bernie Sanders by like 2 years. If we look at somebody like Buttigieg, right? Buttigieg worked in what's that fucking law firm? That scummy ass law firm. The one that raised the prices on bread in Canada. McKinsey. Yeah. He has a shit ton of work in McKinsey, and they do a shit ton of work in economics. So if you were to go off of that alone, clearly Pete is fit for any job that has a direct impact on the economy, i.e. transportation, right? What is Pete's first big proposal? Let's tax cigarettes like we tax, let's tax gasoline in the same manner that we tax cigarettes, as a luxury tax. As if it's a luxury to pay money to drive your car to go to a fucking job. As if that's some sort of fucking luxury. The alternative being that you don't have to walk, I suppose. Any basic economist, any basic bitch 101 economist can tell you. And I know, pulling out the Econ 101 line, but this is real. Buttigieg was the mayor of a town that's 90% Notre Dame students. Bingo. He is the mayor of a bunch of assholes and people who are trapped in that town with that assholes. That pack of assholes, excuse me. But what he proposes then is that cigarettes are equivalent to gasoline, that you use them in the exact same way, so they're substitutable. Like in most cases, you can pitch hit and use a spoon as a fork or a fork as a spoon. Won't always work. Soup comes to mind, right? But you can pinch hit if you need to. Those are substitutable items. And if you're looking for silverware, the purchase of silverware is actually 3 separate items, knife, fork, and spoon. You could reasonably buy any of those, right? Relatively speaking, substitutable. If you're trying to heat your home and you actually have a chance to build the home in a certain way, you can substitute a gas line for an electric line if all factors are present that you could do so, right? I.e. both services are offered. You know what you can't do with cigarettes? You can't run a goddamn combustion engine, can you? He's snoring. This is great. He's a snorer. He's got bad sinuses. But yeah, you can't run a combustion engine in that way. That's a dishonest application of it. But again, if you're an expert fetish, Buttigieg clearly knows what he's talking about. Look at how much time he has in McKinsey. Yeah, as hard as you try, you can't run a fucking combustion engine on cigarettes. We've all tried it. We've all been desperate. We just needed to get a few extra feet, but it doesn't work. But they do fetishize the expert and they fetishize the individual. Failing fetishizing the individual through standpoint epistemology as uber alles, they will defer to the expert. And you also know how negative it can be from Dr. fucking Fauci. Nobody ought to like Fauci but assholes who are addicted to this shit. That's another warning sign. The conservatives are awful people, but at least they don't like Fauci. And Fauci is expertise fetishism run a fucking muck. And frankly, standpoint epistemology run a fucking muck. Just because he's a keyboard Italian or whatever doesn't make his fucking point any better. He caused, what? How many people are dead? I forget how many 9/11s it is. It's like over 100.
A lot of people.
So it's closing in on 200 9/11s. Son of a bitch is still held as some fucking expert in the field. His expertise is shit. Demonstrably shit. There are 600,000 people dead because of this asshole. A metric fuck ton. Thank you. Yes. Individualism is basically an extremist ideology in the U.S. And the thing about individualism is by itself, asserting that the individual is important is the most banal political statement you can make. Unless you live under King George. Which we don't because he's dead. Like, it's a banal statement. Misapplied, whoo boy. Again, we're going to get to that. All right. So from these things, we get our next fun thing. And Henry, this is one of your favorites. This is one of yours. Excuse me, John. This is one of yours. I just outed you on chat. Nolan. All right. Part of the neoliberal ideology. Well, I made it equal as best I can. Part of neoliberal ideology is to know knowledge itself is subjective, but the thing itself, right, is objective. This is the essentialist nature of the thing. The Marxist and the Hegelian arrive at this knowledge differently. We know of the thing essentially by the negation of the thing, what it isn't. All right, that's dialectics. They can think dialectically. They don't often. They define things in essentialist, assertive manner. They define the thing. And sometimes that's good enough, right? Again, if you look at forks, you can define a fork. It's a small spear. You can define a spear. It's a big fork, right? The essential quality, it stabs. Depending on how big it is, it does one thing or the other, right? Easy enough, not controversial. Now let's go to whiteness. Suddenly the idea of essentialism, as applied, it creates an immalleable whiteness, something that is distinct from everything else. There cannot be any crossovers. And so far, you're like, okay, I think I know where you're going with this. This is about to sound really sketchy, because that means there's an essential Jewishness, an essential blackness. And I want everybody just to take 5 seconds and tell me if that doesn't sound like something I could go read on the Daily Stormer. Hey, Cenk, you're up.
Yeah.
You were snoring. It was beautiful. We love it. We were going to draw dicks on you, but then we realized none of us were near you and didn't have markers.
Got me there.
Yeah. We're all in our bunkers. Also,
You just
I've
talk a lot
managed
of
to
shit.
out 2 of us on our real names tonight. So, good job there. But, yeah, what it defines these things as is something with an immutable quality that gives it that identity. Breitbart is a check with your name on it for that. Yeah. Yeah, really. That's literally what they dabble in. Essential whiteness, essential blackness, etc. There is nothing different. And that essentialism, as you can imagine, leads to some pretty problematic fucking situations. The biggest one is bigotry. overt bigotry, violent bigotry. The more sinister one is the subjective bigotry then baked into the system, because now we're starting to see the thing take shape, right? We know it's based on the individual. We know that the individual has essentialist immutable qualities, and we know that their merit can only be valued through the market. This leads us to something that is bored into liberalism itself that they certainly love. This is the Malthusian evaluation.
No.
Uh-huh.
On the road.
This is, if you will, the opposite side of merit. This is this is how you rate the unmerited. Okay? And this is something that we as leftists actually do have to work on, myself included. Just because I can identify I have the problem doesn't mean I don't have the problem. This evaluation is essentially a utilitarian violent bigotry, or as Lee Atwater called it, the Southern strategy. Correct. This ugly side to merit then gives you an opportunity to weigh the unmerited. For whatever reason they're unmerited. Maybe it's their essential black nature that they can't overcome, right? They won't just pull up their fucking pants already or lace up their bootstraps. Maybe it's just that they really are purely bigots. They were born bigots and they will die bigots, and you can't reach them. You just have to manage this cancer. Maybe
Manage out.
And maybe the Irish only have utility in crop production, and they don't really need all that food because they waste it on having kids. So we can let them starve to death. That
In
Malthusian,
every other country.
yeah, that Malthusian evaluation is the starting point for this, because they had to, they essentially, if you will, we worked backwards to arrive at it. If you look at it chronologically, it starts with the Malthusian evaluation: who is worthy and who isn't, who should have to follow the rules, who doesn't, who should have to suffer and who shouldn't. This is the utilitarianism built into liberalism. Frankly, I don't want to say it's perverted, but I would be lying. Because utilitarianism works great if you're trying to rate what video game you want to play, or whether or not it's more productive in the moment to watch Sons of Trier or jack off. But it's not really productive. It's not a productive way to evaluate who gets food today. And that utilitarianism is built into the Malthusian evaluation, as I like. That's my term. You can just call it Malthusianism, but I prefer the Malthusian evaluation because it's an active process. Okay, so that's stickler point. Pardon me, my kid woke up. But the Malthusian evaluates these objects for their essential qualities. What are they, in this case, what are they doing with whatever we give them? And then it rates them on social categories. Are they working hard enough to pay for their damn kids? Or are they just humping all the time and having more kids and having more mouths to feed? Are they exploding the population? Are they spending all their time drinking and doing drugs and jacking off? Are they acquiring capital and profiting?
I don't understand why you just don't exploit everybody and throw everybody under the bus.
Well, if you exploit everybody, there's nobody left to benefit from the exploitation. We have to have a way of determining who should get the profits of that. And Thomas Malthus gives us that. I don't want to say thankfully, because you couldn't resurrect and kill that guy enough for all the fucking crimes he's responsible for throughout history. As a side note, when they bitch about how Marx, right? When they bitch about how Marx got all these people killed with Marxism, none of these motherfuckers dropped the name Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus predates Marx, was an active participant in the fucking slaughter of the Irish through the Irish famine, and has been the core guiding principle of every violent action because of his perverse usage of utilitarianism. So you want to talk about who has the most blood on their hands in fucking history? It's either Malthus or his father. And you couldn't resurrect those two because his father, whatever he did to that kid, produced Thomas Malthus. So I don't know which one you want to fucking blame, but if you were to resurrect them and execute them on a daily basis, you couldn't literally be doing it fast enough to pay for all the fucking blood they've shed. You want to play that game with fucking Dan Cohen, Thomas Malthus, the biggest murderer in history, bar none. To the point where a lot of the fucking killings, god damn it, Malthus. I wrote a 6-page diatribe about how I hate him in Sociology 201 in class. Good. Good. You know what the problem is? You didn't get the 7 pages. That's my only critique. You could write more. Biggest. History's most monstrous thinker. Bar none. Again, active participant in the Irish famine and his version of utilitarianism we live under now. That's the exact, if you wanted to pinpoint one exact reason our lives suck, Malthus is it. That is where I would I'll die on that hill fighting that fight. Nobody has spilled more blood and nobody has ruined more lives and social policies than fucking Thomas Malthus. Worst person ever. And Milton Friedman is on that list of potential candidates. Bar none. Thomas Malthus for the fucking win. Anything so far? Or are you ready for the grand finale, John? You ready to bring it home?
Ready for Ubermensch, if that's what it is.
We are now going to Tina and the Ubermensch. Because I don't think these ideologies are so far apart. And I have to start with this. To be fair, it was a 2-page max assignment. All right, but still, I got to be honest, chat. I can't write enough. I could fill notebooks with how many crimes Thomas Malthus is responsible for, and I would run out of notebooks. I'd have to go buy more. I'm a man who has a lot of fucking notebooks. I think a lot of weird thoughts and write them down. All right, so we're into the final stretch. What does all this lead to? What are their governing cores besides the Malthusian evaluation of human life? Right? If you will, they have their own unholy trinity. That's one of them. The next is Tina, or the end of history. There is no alternative to capitalism. And this is really, really critical, right? You've heard these terms. What they mean, ultimately, is that the ideas of liberal democratic capitalism, as applied through neoliberalism, are eternal. There is no end to these things. They are we are in a static point in history, devoid of meaning, and in the crucible of the market.
The end of history.
It is the end of history. The game is over. The neoliberal consensus of the 1980s governs the world. Capitalist countries govern the world. Capitalism and the market ideology govern the world. They control everything. There is nothing next. There is no human beyond. Which is actually at odds with their Ubermenschen ideology, which we will get to. The eternality of capitalism means that all of human history has to arrive at this point. All of our collective past has to be synthesized into this fucking orb, this black hole, if you will. This eternal thing that sucks everything in and traps it and nothing can get out from. This fucking locked box, right? I like black hole better here. This black hole of destruction. No begin point, no end point. It simply is. And subjects born under that, like all of us on this podcast, everybody in chat, and umpteen millions of people, billions even. This is what we are to know. We are to erode an idea that history leads us to this point. We have to yield our past, right? It is an affront to Heidegger's being in time. It is a rejection of fascism in that regard, because it doesn't see us as objects in time. We are static, essentially objects. This is what we are. Everything that is us is contained in our individual atoms. That's it. It's hardwired in. It's also against the Marxist idea of the species being, which can see the species historically and vertically. We are not part of a collective. You are an atom. You are your own black hole orbiting within this collection of black holes, each of you at the crucible of physics, if you will, physics being the market in this case. Anything that happens is always within that system. And go right ahead, John. Bring us into the Ubermensch. Bring us home.
So your understanding of the Ubermensch is a little bit more complete than mine. My understanding of it is
shoot.
Do you remember the the class that Indian professor gave on fascism.
Yeah.
You linked it to me a while ago. I don't remember the
Oh,
name
what's
of the
his name?
talk,
I always
but
forget his name. He's such a good reference.
yeah, my understanding, that was one of the better analyses of it that I've seen, and he mentions Nietzsche heavily.
Well, it's Nietzsche's concept, yes.
Yeah, and or rather, he's talking about fascism, and he mentions Nietzsche
Yeah.
a lot. But anyways, the concept of the Ubermensch, my understanding of it is that all of life is struggle. You are always struggling to achieve anything, and it is only through that struggle, through that crucible, that any human accomplishment is achieved. And A, that means struggle is good, and B, the point of the struggle is that all of the suffering that everybody feels at once adds up to a larger sum of producing the greatest humans possible, or the greatest human possible, which is the Ubermensch, the perfect human that can accomplish anything that is the peak of whatever humans here on Earth could possibly do. And that this is possible because we killed God. He's that term originates with him, right?
Nietzsche, yeah, the parable of the madman. Absolute slapper.
And the idea is supposed to be that we killed God and replaced him with ourselves.
No, that's slightly different. The origin of the idea of the death of God comes from the parable of the madman, to my knowledge. Let me preface it.
Okay.
In the parable of the madman comes to town. I'm going to do a quick retelling. The madman comes to town with a lantern seeking God. He can't find him anywhere. Now it's midday. He's shoving lantern in his faces. Cough, Diogenes, cough. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He panics because he realized what has happened. We have killed God, you and I. The blood is on our hands, and the magnitude of our crime is so great, who is left to punish us? Nobody. So what we're going to have to do then is we're going to have to become gods ourselves. And everybody mocks the madman. And he says, I've arrived too early. We're not ready for it. So the Ubermensch is at a point in history later than the era of nihilism now. In that God is dead and we are only now reeling with the reality of God dying. And this is, I want to say 1884? Might be earlier than that, because 1884 might be also Sprach Zarathustra. I am not a Nietzschean scholar. I know of Nietzsche, and I don't pretend to be an expert, but I know enough to get by. So the murder of God has already happened. That's the Enlightenment, right? The Enlightenment comes along, we kill God. Eventually we kill the sovereign, his representative on earth. We finalize the act. The blood is on our hands, and we're not prepared for that void. And what will fill that void is the Ubermensch.
Yeah.
Well, Nietzsche loves his words that mean four things, so we're going to get into two of those definitions and see how they relate to both Tina and neoliberalism at large, and see if we can't pick these tendencies out in public. Obviously, go ahead.
No, well, I was going to say, could you speak to what he talks about with struggling? Because this is where I would begin to tie it in with standpoint epistemology. I think these two things come together at that idea. So he says that struggling is like a really fundamental part of how the Ubermensch would be produced, right?
No, the Ubermensch is produced by people who keep winning the struggle. It is fundamental. So
yeah, because you can't, because life is inherently struggle. That means that the only way to become the Ubermensch is to struggle the most, essentially, right?
No, the process,
or struggle the best.
The process of becoming the Ubermensch, that is in Also Sprach Zarathustra, and let me see if I can recall it, because I didn't go through that text heavily. It essentially is this, right? His ideas on struggles are that we are locked in a crucible of struggle. He took the Hobbesian idea of the war of all against all and applied it even to against ourselves. Okay, the struggle is both against yourself and it's against others and it's against nation states, it's against monarchies, etc. It's a struggle. Everything is in struggle. And what survives that struggle is to be considered either strong or weak.
Oh boy.
Well, get ready. Um, if through that process of struggle, what will eventually happen is there will be born humans who are the apex of their respective identities. Okay, I don't, he wouldn't use the term supreme, I don't think, but I will here. The supreme Jew, the supreme trans, the supreme Muslim, the supreme black, the supreme white, etc. Out of that class of people, you will have created you will have created through this crucible of struggle individuals who are beyond the spectrum of good and evil, in that they embody the totality of it and can act within it at their leisure because they understand it so perfectly. They know when to be good, they know when to be evil, so they are beyond the moral essential assignment of good or evil. They're beyond it because it's not about being good or evil, it is about the correct application of what is appropriate in the moment. He calls it the artist tyrant, if my memory serves me. And these individuals will be able to operate collectively out of their own interest and apply that to the masses and force another evolution in humanity out of that pool of superior beings that goes beyond what exists. So if you want to imagine it as some sort of racist crucible where the best of each race interbreed to produce better even than their own race, right? That's what you're dealing with. That's what is also different than fascism. Nietzsche believed that there was such a thing as a Jew that could surpass good and evil, the Muslim that could surpass good and evil, the Christian, the Hindu, and so on, and that because they would surpass good and evil, they would be attracted to each other, and their actions would be, if you will, devoid of responsibility to the masses.
Well, but the point here though is that the Ubermensch is achieved by the Ubermensch doesn't struggle. Yeah, it through the crucible, because what's important here is that the Ubermensch doesn't struggle, but that's the Ubermensch. Whoever produces the Ubermensch has struggled.
The Ubermensch will struggle as well. They're struggling alongside coexisting with other Ubermensch if their goals align, and they are struggling against other Ubermensch if their goals don't align. And it is only when the Ubermensch
having everything.
Yeah, it's so hard having everything right. We're bringing that one back around. Don't you worry, we're getting there. So in those conflicts, the application of good and evil here are trying to tie yourselves to specific ideologies that have moral yeses and nos. Primarily collectivist ideologies. This is where Nietzsche would have actually rejected fascism, because fascism ties itself to a moral good and evil axis. It's just the inverse of the communist axis, right? Instead of, the idea that the state is there to protect the weak and the state is there to allow all of humanity to flourish. Under fascism, the state is to be embodied by a small collective of people, but all of society has to feed that. Right? So the strong have to be fed by the weak, and they ought to, because that betters all of them in the movement. Nietzsche rejected both of those.
Man, they unlocked Predator.
Yeah, Nietzsche was a real libertarian, a real individualist. He believed that in any of those scenarios, since you were bound to that binary of weak, strong, good, evil, you couldn't be the Ubermensch by definition. So the Nazi obsession with the Ubermensch was a perversion of Nietzsche to justify their bullshit. There's a reason Nietzsche was like, yeah, I just shoot them people. I just shoot them all. I don't give a shit. All the proto-Nazis running around Germany. And he was like, he was so obsessed with how they were perverting his words that he was like, the Germans are just filthy and low and always have to steal from the genetically superior Polish. Like,
that's one way to do it.
Yeah, that's real. Like, he was convinced that he wasn't, he was convinced, and it's possible that he had Polish blood in him. It's Central Europe. Everybody breeds with everybody there. But he was convinced that he was a pure Polish person. Like, he just internalized he was 100% Polish, it was just a byproduct of the cruelties of history that he was stuck among all these filthy fucking Prussians who were too fucking low-blooded to do anything.
Genetic testing really ruined that for them, huh?
Yeah, well, the obsession with genetics, I mean, Nietzsche whines up and down. Nietzsche would have shot all the anti-Semites because it's not his message, but I got to tell you, it takes very few twists on that crank to get to fascism, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when they,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that Marx caused the Stalinist purges, but yeah, there's a lot more you have to twist, but you can still twist some cranks and get there. Nietzsche, I mean, you're talking about a reskin almost. You know what I mean? You're not talking very hard. It's a pretty easy walk from point A to point B. You know.
Leisurely stroll almost.
Yeah. So I understand what he says. I still reject Nietzsche on Nietzschean principles. I understand and I agree that what he said was not proto-fascism, but come on, man, you were clearly hanging out in the same neighborhood. I get that your house was at a different house, but like you're on the same block, dude. You're not like
new phone. Who this?
yeah. This is, don't ghost your boys.
The irony, of course, is that there's no new phone.
I mean, while Nietzsche hated Nazis
Right?
and anti-Semites was in many ways a proto-fascist. I disagree. I think just like neoliberalism hangs out the same turf as fascism, I think it's adjacent enough that we can definitely say they're in the same neighborhood. There's clearly a reason they took that shit.
They
That
just start tiptoeing over.
small point of contention. They still had to twist the knobs to get there. The straight through line of fascism is right through liberalism and monarchy. But Nietzsche's a libertarian. If he's a pure libertarian in the purest sense of the fucking term, literally the architect of modern libertarian thought, when you boil their shit down, the brutality of it all, definitely adjacent to fascism. And if you were to say like, well, it's adjacent enough that they can overlap, yeah, again, they're hanging out the same block parties. Nietzsche's like, oh, well, why are all the white supremacists hanging out at my barbecue? Well, you threw it on their block, man. I don't know what to tell you. Oh,
So the one
I'll chat. One night we will do modern libertarian thought. If you think Malthus is cruel, wait till you see the people who agreed with him how they think.
Oh yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
agree to that one.
Go ahead, John.
So this is the last bit of stuff that I've got to explore with this stuff, but I do think that there is some connection between the Nietzschean the Nietzschean obsession with struggle and standpoint epistemology.
Shoot, I'm
because so the reason that I think this is essentially if the point of if the only way to produce the Ubermensch, which is the point of the market in the first place. This is how these things are tied.
That is how they utilize.
If you have a meritocratic system, the point is to try to encourage the bestest people to produce the goodest, if you will.
Right.
That is the entire thing is set up for that, and the idea is that society will flow forth from the fact that these people are achieving these things. These achievements are great. So you need the market, the meritocracy, and the point is to produce the Ubermensch. But standpoint epistemology ties in there, where standpoint epistemology would say something along the lines of like, in order for the Ubermensch to be possible, the Ubermensch would have to be one of these marginalized minority people, because they're the only thing that fits into the puzzle piece that would, they're the only people who have outsider perspective and can see the thing as a whole, whatever the thing is. And I think that these things tie together because that would suggest that the only way that somebody could struggle the most to achieve Ubermenschness would be that they would be the most marginalized, right? And as we've covered, being the most minoritized person does not necessarily, like we've said with Nazis, does not necessarily mean you're somebody that would be sympathetic, right? So do you think that those two things might tie together? I'm curious. I was playing around with that in my head. I want to know what you think.
I'm going to disagree on 2 points. One, it's not the best people producing the goodest, it's the best people producing even better people. It's a minor conception point, right? What I would disagree with is this. The formation of the Ubermensch is somebody who has seen both sides of the system. You have to see good and evil. So the idea that they would look for somebody outside the system to produce the absolute best is half of the coin, because they would have to have somebody outside the system and bring them in, right? Because they have to know good and evil. They have to know both so that they are superior. They can move beyond it. You have to understand the whole of the thing in their formation.
Are you telling me they think Obama's the Ubermensch?
Yeah, one of them.
Yes.
But you also have to have somebody who is in the system move beyond the system, i.e., force themselves to be an outsider, right? Somebody who's above it all because of their sheer acquisition. Jeff Bezos would be an Ubermensch. Elon Musk, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, right? All these people. They resent Donald Trump because he really pulls the shit down, but Donald Trump would be a perfect example, literally in and out of the system, reviled yet seeing how it operated internally as well, right? These are all those people that what you call the 1%, that's what they would conceive of. Not probably wouldn't verbalize it, but it's certainly the ideology they're following is the Ubermensch. Marianne Williamson, she would not be, because of course she's in a marginalized group, so she could technically qualify as a female Jew Ubermensch, right? She could qualify on those grounds because of her identity. There's a window there. If she is rich, she's not in that mainstream consensus because she does hold some opinions that we wouldn't knee-jerk disagree with. It's the murder of AIDS patients that we kind of have a problem with, right? We have a real practical problem with her being a killer. Fucking, but yeah. So she's still outside of that, but it's certainly nearing the realm, obviously, because of her social profile and wealth. Yeah, very clouded window. But yeah, so with that formulation, the idea, though, is that the standpoint epistemology then is not, how do I put it? It doesn't help you manufacture the Ubermensch. The application of their expertise or standpoint is the privilege of being the Ubermensch. That is why you have to value their opinions, their desires, and make sure they're devoid of responsibility to their social lessers. Does that make sense? In that, John, I don't think you're wrong for connecting the two. Actually, that was a point I was going to make, that those two things are tied. But the way you tie them ties it as a beginning point, and I would tie it as part of the end point. And there's probably, if you want to be very, not just fair for the sake of debate, but fair about reality, it's probably a bit of both. How are you going to choose what minorities qualify as the Ubermensch if you don't apply their standpoint and apply their drives?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I think that's interesting about it is that we've discussed, like, one of the points of neoliberalism, at least in the current iteration, is a large part of what they preached is, that I found, is something along the lines of, like, well, we would just do libertarianism if, we could accomplish reparations or something like that. Because that's what, every time I hear the Democrats talk, that's essentially what I hear, which is that the only reason that we do this government shit is because stuff has been set so wrong by bad actors at certain points that we have to set it correctly, and then as a result, we can lay off of everything because we can achieve a sort of baseline from which everybody who fails is guilty of their failure.
You can't do reparations ideologically as a neoliberal because that admits to a social responsibility to social lessers. They are incapable of doing it.
I think a lot of them, the way they see it is that because there are libertarians who argue also for some sort of redistributive model from which you launch the actual project of libertarianism.
Sure.
Because the and the reason that I think these two things tie into each other is just that it's the only way that, like, at least, and now we're talking about like very modern, like, real world politics as opposed to philosophy here, but like it is the only way that you can like manage to keep a coalition party going as Democrats, because that is what the Democratic Party is. It's a coalition party. It's not a class party.
Right.
So the only way to keep that going is to try to meld those things together. But in terms of standpoint epistemology and Ubermenschness, the thing that I find the most interesting about this is that, like we've discussed, a lot of the Democrats' policy are sort of paying the interest on what we owe Black people and people of color and indigenous people in this country, which is a lot, considering that, like, we basically built this country on exploiting them. In fact, not even basically. It was that was a huge. That was like one of the progenitoring factors of it.
Yeah.
So, what I would say is that, let me see if I can connect these. When it comes to the Ubermenschness, they're paying the interest of what we owe these marginalized people off, and we're not actually doing the work of doing real reparations or any sort of restorative program.
I would argue we
in that way, so what I wanted the point just here is that we're never actually accomplishing it. We're only just churning the system forward. We're only just paying the interest on it. I'm thinking that one of the things about Ubermenschness is that if the only way to produce an Ubermensch is to make sure that they have been one of these marginalized people, doesn't that mean who's marginalized and who is in the majority needs to be a rolling target constantly? Because as soon as somebody becomes the Ubermensch, then they have, well, I guess by definition, if you're the Ubermensch, you're in the minority of people. But the only way for a new Ubermensch to come about would be for somebody to be in a minority to begin with, right?
No, again, no.
Yeah, I guess that's the key difference, because it's about producing an Ubermensch through breeding, which is something I did not understand.
That's the Nietzschean formation, which again they launch off of, but their formation of the Ubermensch is through the market crucible primarily, and it is through understanding the system.
I think maybe they've unmarried the part about having about producing it through offspring.
Right.
I think maybe they've taken that part out. In which case this would tie in, sort of.
Yes, they have removed it. The idea that it can only come from somebody external to the system is in flagrant violation of the status of somebody like Jeff Bezos, Mackenzie Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. There's nothing that externalizes them from the system. They are the system. The system is for them. They are simply beyond the system. The two ways you're going to move beyond good and evil are either A, simply being beyond the system, which is implied to be government, right? That's the implication of it all. Is that government is the system that you have to know the ins and out of, or you have to go through the crucible of being an out-group and then in-grouped into the people who can run government. And, as you stated earlier, we do have to self-marginalize, right? We have to intentionally marginalize and put ourselves beyond. Somebody like Bill Gates can't do that unless they amass a shit ton of wealth, which Bill Gates has done. Other people can get by with lower amounts of wealth to achieve this status. Hillary Clinton, $3 billion. Kamala Harris, if I remember correctly, somewhere in the 50 to 100 million range, right? They can do it. But in the case of somebody like Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton, the first axis is gender. The implication, of course, of the Ubermensch is if you translate that word literally, over man here being the gender neutral form, short for human, right? But if you take that in a very strict feminist way, then you literally mean man, right? So you would need to include Uber woman. Now, in Kamala Harris's case, also she has the dual identities of being Southeast Asian, and she has being what's the fucking term? Hispanic Black, being Jamaican, right? I forget the term.
Hispanic Black?
Caribbean.
Fuck, see, that's what I'm talking about. I literally forgot the word Caribbean Black. the phrase Caribbean black. Look, sue me, all right? I've been talking about the fucking Ubermenschen, the end of history, and black holes all
No, you're
night.
fine. This is, I thought that was random.
Yeah. It's a random word to forget. But she has those dual out groupings so that she can, when she is introduced into the system and melds herself into the system, she is then seen as being beyond the system, right? She has achieved that status in the other way possible, besides just amassing a shit ton of money, grifting the hardest, if you will, right?
Mhm.
And that's why somebody like, if you look at somebody like Bill Gates, who stole directly from Apple, if you look at somebody like Elon Musk, who stole directly from fucking literal slaves in South Africa, um, their crimes are irrelevant, right? Doesn't matter. Epstein and Weinstein, first off, I think it's because they're Jews, we can cut them loose. You know what I'm saying? I think that's why they were cut loose. But they would have been in that same exact category based off of their wealth and their Jewishness. They would have been the Ubermenschen out of that group, right? I'm going to go ahead and move into mine now, my version of it, right?
Mhm.
So we often formulate that neoliberalism is hyper-individualism. But hyper-individualism would be brutal and subject us all to a perpetual scrutiny that is simultaneously appraising us for praise and prepared to destroy us ruthlessly. Like an individualism we can't even comprehend right now, right? That's what we're all afraid of, is hyper-individual, true isolation and hyper scrutiny. No ability to form human bonds, and all of our actions, down to what you eat for breakfast, fucking scrutinized, right? What he proposes, what Nietzsche proposes, is the idea of the Ubermensch, in one sense, the superior man, because the superior man is beyond good and evil. But it's also the beyond man, that is beyond the bindings of the strong and the weak. That represents itself in neoliberalism as the disconnection of the wealthy, of the deserving, from responsibility for action. Why can't we punish George Bush for his war crimes? Why can't we punish Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan? Pick a fucking US president, right? Why can't we? It is because that would make them responsible to society, to the other. And they are beyond society. They are superior to it and above it. The burdens of social cohesion, of infrastructure, of fucking resource allocation, those burdens are beyond them. Those are concerns of the masses, and the masses consequently bear the tax burden thereof, and the masses are subject to discipline. This is presented through the militarization fetish, right? These people fetishize power above all else. The will to power specifically. That Nietzschean formation against the other. And the other in this case are the self-described strong, your fascists, right? They all profess a very deep loathing of fascism. And it was the American government, in part, who combated fascism. Obviously, their allies in that were the communists, who did, frankly, a better job at it. But nonetheless, they were still opposed to fascism and brutally engaged in taking that down. The same level of brutality brought by the Soviets, the actual ideological fight, within the collectivists, right? So they disdain the strong. We also see every day of our fucking lives how they loathe us, aka the poor, the weak. Absolute disdain for the weak. We are the thing that needs policing. We are the thing that needs controlled and managed. To them, we are the fucking surplus. Right? We come back to that Malthusian evaluation. We are the problems in society that have to be managed. Right? Social cohesion is beyond them. They're not interested in a society, at least not this version of society. They are constantly grinding away at that to reveal something different, something superior to them, for them. It is, again, it is simultaneously the superiority of it, the overman, and beyond this frailty of existence. And that is probably their biggest ideological clash. Because if you're moving beyond, chronologically speaking, history has to progress so you can get beyond, right? It conflicts heavily with the end of history, and that's where a lot of the fucking contradictions in our society present themselves. And a lot of that wishy-washy fucking decision-making they actually do is paralyzing. Because in a very real sense, they're conceiving simultaneously of a society beyond this pile of shit, and this is the thing. This is essentially society. They're trapped. They're trapped in that fucking conflict. That is their contradiction, and we all suffer for it. Fuck. I know I'm forgetting something. I always am. But yeah, the way I interpret it is essentially based on merit, based on the essential qualities of these individuals, based on that process of struggles you described, and based on the reverence of their standpoint and their own knowledge and epistemology, we produce then these Ubermenschen who are beyond society and who actively seek to eradicate the society that is, but also simultaneously accept the society as is. And that is the contradiction we live under.
Huh. Yeah, it's
That's a lot to take in, I know. It's a lot of big level ideas.
What do you think about the idea though that the Ubermensch might never, we might never really completely achieve maybe the perfect one, but that the Ubermensch becomes such a moving target that society lurches forward or churns forward the way that it has been, ever more destructively toward trying to produce one, but never actually produces one because ideologically it can't. Because by the time you become one, you've become a non-marginalized person, which contradicts the idea of the Ubermensch, which would necessarily require you to be marginalized.
I'm not bound to that. I'm not bound to that idea. I reject that one. I do not reject the idea of the cyclical nature of it because that is how you grind it down. Simply put, you can't crush this stuff. You can't crush society under the wheel of history without turning the wheel, without actually grinding it. And the wheel is that cycle, right? You're individually hung up with the idea that Ubermensch has to come from external. Bill Gates disproves that prima facie. It does not disprove that that is not one way to achieve that status. It disproves that that's the only way to attain that status. His marginalization is not at all quote unquote marginalized. Society literally bends over to lick that guy's ass for no good reason. There is literally nothing less marginalized than Bill Gates, if you will. He can show up anywhere and people will just fucking verbally blow him, and people will offer to blow him. Or, if you're in the case of Epstein, will offer to make sex slaves blow him. Literally, there's nothing less marginalized, right? So that, don't get too hang up on that part of it. Just because there can be an Ubermenschen, whatever, an Ubermenschen, I don't know, like an Ubermensch, trans femme, Hindu, there can be an Ubermenschen trans femme Hindu just as much as there can be an Ubermenschen cishet white guy. They will be separate Ubermenschen. There isn't one. It's not the einen Mensch, it's the Ubermensch. It's not the one man, it's the overman. So don't get too hung up on that. Because the idea is that when you move beyond good and evil, your epistemology should start aligning, and to be a little bit fucking religious about it, you should start vibrating on the same frequency, right? You should start connecting on a metaphysical level with the other Ubermenschen to know what's best for everybody else and to make those decisions, even if they are pure cruelty. Madeleine Albright's a fine example of that. Back in the 90s, when they were talking about how many essentially children America killed with its actions, both provoking the Iraq War and the ongoing sanctions and the bombings, and in public made the cold calculation that to punish Saddam Hussein, 500,000 dead children was absolutely worth it. And you go, well, you'd be like, well, she was a woman, right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. She's not that marginalized, right? How marginalized is an old white woman in this society? You can argue she's marginalized against sexists. That's it. She has the power, and she has the ability to go on TV and say, like, yeah, it's worth 1,000 dead Iraqi kids to punish Saddam Hussein. Most of us would find that to be a sickening proposal. Hell, when people asked about that, who did they fucking question? They questioned her at town hall. They said, look, if you really want to punish Saddam Hussein, fine. Why don't you just go kill him? Why am I paying for the rest of this shit? And her stance was like, because effectively because the right people made the decision. Is she outgrouped in any meaningful sense? No. You can stick to a very basic identity understanding and say, yeah, she's marginalized, but Madeleine Albright was not at all marginalized in any practical sense of the term. At least anything that has real substantive meaning. I'm sure somebody said something anti-Jewish to her or anti-woman to her before, but, if she really wanted to, if she found it that egregious, could she not just have them killed? She'd kill 500,000 Iraqi kids. What's one fucking dickhead?
Well, conveniently, Madeline already
That
did
does
that
make
math for
sense.
you. One fucking dickhead is about 500,000 children.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be entirely justified for her to just bomb Kansas at that point, if you follow her logic far enough. But yeah, that's why I said don't get hung up on that. I agree with you that Barack Obama is not produced by being a rich white guy like Bill Gates. But nonetheless, in the end, both Bill Gates and Barack Obama would be considered Ubermensch by other neoliberals. Something to strive to be. Something that you should bow your head to. If you look at a lot of the critique of the Republican Party when fighting with Obama, was essentially
just playing it.
What's that?
You can try multiplayer,
He's on chat now.
which is like just go right into the
He's just playing a video game. Nice.
scene.
A lot of that critique boiled down to essentially they weren't playing fair. They weren't playing by the rules of the other Ubermensch. They themselves became weak for a moment in whining that he wasn't, that they weren't playing the game properly. That's why the big bitch is, when you boil it all down, they denied the black president his Supreme Court nomination. There's no accountability on the part of Barack Obama for all the suffering he's responsible for. There's
If I can't jump in,
No, I mean, his presidency has aged poorly recently, but that's been a pretty recent development. And it might take a long time for us to ever, just as a society, come to terms with it. So we haven't even really done that with Bush. And
hell no, they're whitewashing Bush right now.
Well, I guess you
Yeah.
can change character.
They're
no,
out.
they are. They definitely are.
They're out there whitewashing that doofy motherfucker. Who, honestly, Bush and his axis of cronies actually sit in opposition to neoliberalism in the more abhorrent neoconservatism, if you will, the aggressive form of neoliberalism. Because the major difference was
Yeah, we got worried. You didn't have to worry about readers.
how do I put it back? Clinton was a lot less averse to the overt levels of bloodshed. He loved his bombings. He loved his sanguine, passive discipline, right?
Yeah. Because we were just testing, so
the difference there is in the neoconservative, you have an idea that has to export neoliberalism as if it's not the ruling ideology. So they have to go to as many wars as fucking possible. If you get a chance, listen to Blowback on the Iraq War, the podcast.
I've listened to the whole thing.
Yeah. Fucking Rummy and those guys were very aggressive in their assertion of neoliberalism. That's the difference. It was not the idea of this bloodless animal that, so what if they died? It was that we got to go kill more of them, right? We have to be aggressive about our assertions. We need to create the final hegemony, right? If you will, they view the project as unfinished almost, where somebody like Clinton, as you would put too, certainly with somebody like even Elizabeth Warren, right? The idea is you're going to have to tweak these knobs and fix it up. It's not where it ought to be. But with the idea of the neocon is that it's not there yet. We need to make it happen. We need to be assertive about it. But all those people were still in the club. That was an argument among two factions of Ubermensch, which comically enough would be the thing where you could say well, we don't have an Ubermensch because they were clearly arguing about it, right? And Ubermenschen aren't going to argue about it. They're going to be connected at a more deeper ideological level and know that they just should. To which, got my ass, right? Also, chat, I didn't forget about you, but yeah, fuck Marianne Williamson. Doofy woman. Whenever she does something nice, fine, whatever, I don't care. But when she's on her bullshit,
Oh, she can be on her bullshit.
can she get on her bullshit? Yeah. Honestly, if you're not going to bring her to justice for her crimes, then really, unless she's saying something exactly like I want her to say, I'm uninterested. Don't show me that shit. Unless she's exactly mouthing my points, I don't care. Because that's the thing of our society. These people are not accountable to the rest of us. Which is also why I did that big, as we rounded out here to hour 2, we got 5 minutes to kill. That's why I was just mulling over concepts of justice and shit like that. Is because I showed you, right? I showed you that article about that one of them fucking monsters that went in the synagogues.
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
do remember that.
They're gonna let that little fucker rot in jail. They're not gonna punish that kid. I guess oh look, you can never get parole, but that can change too. Her and her cult of doofs, a cult, I tell you. Yeah, they're totally doofs. But yeah, they're not gonna punish these people. So one thing the leftist has to consider is a mode of punishment that is number one, actual punishment, and number two, restorative to the victims, either as a group or the individual, depending on what the crime is. If two people get in a fist fight, the guy breaks his arm, yeah, the punishment there is, you're going to have to help that guy do shit because you broke his arm. You're just going to have to deal with it, right? Restorative in a very literal sense. That's not something that really requires all that jail time. Now, if you're constantly going out there and beating people's asses, okay, you're going to have to do something to be restorative, but you're also going to have to be punished because you can't keep beating people up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, punitive punishments are only really supposed to do so much, and there really are only for even introducing that as like a concept is something that you only reserve for like kind of the worst of the stuff, right? Because that stuff you talked about with like when you break someone's arm or whatever, where you have to help them, there should maybe be a degree of punitive punishment there, but really the part where you help the person do stuff or accomplish things is the part where you're learning, right?
Yeah.
And if you keep doing it from there, then you have to be punitive or whatever.
Right. You have to be more punitive about it. This is where you can tell I'm a true communist, right? Because what does the anarchist have as their weapons? They have beat the guy, torture the guy, kill the guy, exile the guy. Communism gives us a whole host of options. You never hear how many self-professed communists, myself included, are just happily to write off the bigot, right? No, the way to punish the bigot is to make them do things that support the community. Whether or not they learn from it is irrelevant. The point of the punishment is that you wrong these people, now you're going to have to make it right. If you want to be back in polite society, you're going to have to make it right somehow. You're going to have to do something. And the argument then is well, the victim may not want to deal with them. Fine. I didn't say that you had to inflict that person on the victim, but at some point there's going to have to be a measure of bringing as many people as possible back into polite society. And you're going to have to teach them somehow. The punitive part is obviously we're making it clear you're being punished. The restorative part is the work you do for that community to fight the bigotry you were participating in. If you keep it up, then we got to fucking remove your ass from society. That doesn't mean murder. It just means the way you're going to contribute for your restorative mode is behind bars. Case in point, that young man fucking psychopath killer. That woman's labor was taken from us. That woman was taken from us. The way to fix that is not just locking his ass behind bars and playing a 50-50 game or have him repent on his deathbed. The way to fix that is making fucking yarmulkes. Make him make fucking prayer fucking mats. Make him fucking bind holy books. Make him do something with that life. Now you can argue at that point, why aren't you just stealing his labor? Sure. The counterpoint is you take a white guy, you take a black guy, it's a white woman, black woman, whatever, you put him in jail for behind bars for smoking marijuana and make him make license plates, you're nakedly enslaving them.
Well, you heard it here, folks. We were going to have some Muslim prayer mat production gulags.
fucking
That's what
right.
we're aiming for.
If you're gonna fucking attack Muslims for no reason, yes, absolutely. But the
Yeah,
point of
and
it,
I mean that my answer to the I think a good answer to the aren't you just stealing their labor? Yes, in a way, you're also replacing the labor that was stolen from
right?
those communities
That
Legally,
person,
these are all jokes.
right?
legally.
But you know, you're exactly right. That's exactly where I was going with that. You stole that person's labor from the rest of us. We'll never get their creativity back. You killed somebody. Yeah, guess what, asshole? Now you're going to have to do something. You're going to spend that life doing it. That's your path to atonement. You may never get put back in polite society because of it. You're a fucking killer. But your life does not have to be unvalued as just an animalistic killer. You can do something useful with that life. Something we don't know if that person was even going to do that work, but it's irrelevant. The point is, you stole from society. You owe society that. You're going to use that life.
Yeah.
You know, that's the point. That's why I said, well, the way we punish them, you know, you put them in jail for how many years, and somehow, like, the anti-death penalty people are like, that's more humane. Is it? Is it really? Because honestly, if you just want to punish this kid, I could just torture him. Give me a baseball bat. I can make it. You know, if your goal was to torture him, which is all this is, I just speed that process up. You give me a pair of pliers, give me a baseball bat, you tie him to a chair, I'll do the rest. Don't worry about it. Well, that sounds inhuman. What's inhuman to just throw? You already have him throw one life away. Now you're throwing a second life away. Human beings aren't meant to be trash. We produce, we consume. So the punishment there is not to just turn him into a living piece of trash, a memorial of garbage. You know, that's a very Ubermensch punishment, because you can just hold him up and be like, this is what a subhuman looks like. You know, that's exactly what they would want. I don't, that's not sufficient. You're going to be making Teflon and prayer shawls till you die, motherfucker. Yeah, you know, yeah, that's it.
I mean, it's an oversimplification because we obviously aren't getting into the nitty gritty, but yeah, effectively.
Well, yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm fit to give you an idea on that of what justice should look like. I'm not fit to actually administer it, fucking do the fact finding or whatever, you know, have
Right.
that trial. But I give you another example. Somebody says a transphobic slur, right? Just one that'll resonate with chat. Somebody says a transphobic slur. Okay, they should spend 6 months or a year fucking working to support the trans community and not be a dick if they want to be a free member of polite society. It's not an unreasonable exchange. They have to spend some of their leisure time righting their wrong.
Yeah.
You pull what they did to poor Matthew Shepard, your ass is in jail forever. And you're going to do something to help the trans community that doesn't require you to be around them, because you're a fucking danger to those people. And it's not about, at that point, learning a fucking lesson. It is about making up for the fucking horrendous bullshit you did. So it is still punitive, but it's not devoid of a restorative element to support the community that was wronged. That's the major difference. Right now, you take somebody like them, you put them in jail for 22, 32, 42, 50, fucking 500 years consecutive, whatever. All you're saying is that you're trash. That's not... I agree that somebody who commits an act like that is trash, but that's not a good enough solution to the problem. That doesn't solve the immediate problem at hand. Have them making labels for hormone replacement therapy supplements. Yeah, it's more useful than what they did with their labor previously. You know? And I don't... You know, my final point is that, like the anarchist, I don't think we should necessarily be telling people what to do with their labor. But my caveat to that is, unless you're a fucking killer, because you clearly don't know a good way to apply your labor.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know a good thing
Yeah.
to apply your labor to, but we definitely know worse options.
We definitely know what you did was worse than what we can come up with.
Yeah.
As a society, we can put you to better use. You fucked up. You know. And that's the other point to that is, then you don't need to incarcerate so many people, because there are other ways to solve these problems that don't require incarceration. Maybe temporary detainment, which we'll define as a short period of time. Your ass might need to sit down. You might need to cool the fuck down. You know, the idea of a temper tantrum is not that unrealistic. You look at fucking Biden, how he talks to people. The idea that you need a cool down time, but there's a difference between you're smoking a little weed, so you need a cool down of 3 months before we try you, and then another 6 years, And yeah, you're spending the night here because you're acting like an asshole, and tomorrow you can go home. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's, and I recognize the problem then is how do you keep the checks on that society? Punishment under communism, help make materials to help the community you wrong and keep dangerous people away from vulnerable communities. I like it. Yeah, well, again, I'm no expert on justice. I haven't claimed to be, but I can define what justice is, right? And honestly, like, I'm just going off what other communists did on that nakedly. Like, that's how they do it. I think my formulation is slightly different, but that's what other communists would do. And I find it to be superior to the bougie answer, pure punishment, and I find it superior to the anarchist answer, mob justice. We're going to have something between the two. Society has to administer it, a la the anarchist, but we certainly can't have the bourgeoisie justice system, which is designed entirely to support the Ubermenschen and punish the poor for the act of living as a poor person, or being black while eating a sandwich, or being Latino while walking across a piece of geography, or being white while another white person is upset. These are things that we can't allow the system to work like. So we have to,
Like Scots and Englishmen. Or
you know,
Scots.
and I'll say this to chat. This is how I know you're. This is my ending. I'll shut up after this and end the show if everybody's okay with that. Any final points after me, get them in. But when we're done, I'm ending it. I can tell you're my people or not because somebody I've been called a kike a few times, and I've been asked if I was a Hebe before. That person clearly needs a kick in the ass to straighten up, is how I formulate that. Right? That person needs a good swift kick in the ass. They need to do something for Jews at large, not just me, but the whole thing.
The whole community.
I don't think necessarily they should be locked out of society forever, right? Somebody like Marianne Williamson, who murdered AIDS patients, needs to be locked out of society forever because how she applies her labor kills people. The jackass bigot who called me a kike does not need to be thrown away forever. They can learn to not act like that.
They need to learn that you're an asshole for other reasons.
Right. There's plenty of reasons.
More creative.
There's plenty of reasons they hate me. The Jew thing is one. You guys agree. This idea is high heresy to an awful lot of fucking people. That the bigot is something that is a malleable personality trait. That you can affect their material circumstances and maybe we nip it in the bud. That they can go through a journey of self-recovery, as they've already undergone a journey of self-destruction, assisted or not, and that they can simply, quote-unquote, do better, as people like to fucking dismissively say, and I absolutely hate. And they believe it is an essential, immalleable quality of their existence that has to be managed and planned around and overcome as though it were a rock in the road, not something that can be socialized in and out of people based on circumstance, such that the acts can be declared wrong, but the person doesn't need to be thrown away. The meat underneath it, that they can't actually, quote-unquote, do better. And the communist has to look at it differently. We have to look at it as, even if it is distasteful, that they actually do not necessarily have to be essentially bad. And again, obviously, we're leaving out the rapist, the pedophile, the murderer, the real monstrous shit like your Epsteins and stuff. There's nothing you can do with them. You either kill them or you force their labor to go to something that isn't those horrendous activities. And
Which, in fairness, capitalists already do.
Well, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of awfulness out there. But yeah, we ran long again tonight because I love my theory. If you guys are good, I'm willing to call it for tonight. I think it was a productive night.
Yep.
All good.
Yep. You really get to see into my brain. And John, thank you for your contributions. Cenk, I love your snoring. I love your snazzy comments. Gangsta, I know you left to play video games, but I love your snazzy comments too. Always a pleasure with you guys. Always a pleasure with you, chat. Love seeing you. I'll
The-
see you on Twitter. And
The true winners here, chat.
always chat. Yeah, I don't know what we're doing next time. We might tone it down a little bit, or I'll get into libertarianism. I don't know which. I go on vacation the week after that, so I won't be on that week. So I'll either do one more big theory thing, and then we'll do a nice little soft reset. Or we'll just have fun next week. I don't know which.
Hmm.
All right, fam. Stay safe. Don't die. I'll see you in
Be
hell or
safe.
communism. I'm gonna